Imagine for a moment. Just picture that you are walking through a doorway and suddenly the rules of social gravity have entirely changed.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Right. You don't know where to stand. You don't know what the daily routines are, and you might not even fully grasp the unwritten expectations of the people around you.
It's a nightmare scenario for the brain.
It really is. It's like stepping onto a stage where everyone else has the script and you were just handed a blank piece of paper. Your heart rate spikes, your palms get a little sweaty, and you are hyper aware of every single move you make.
Because it is intensely disorienting. I mean, when you enter a completely unfamiliar environment, your brain just goes into absolute overdrive.
Right.
You are instantly scanning the room, trying to categorize threats, trying to figure out the baseline norms just to survive the next 10 minutes.
Yeah, just to get your bearing.
Exactly. It is the absolute definition of overwhelming. Your cognitive load is maxed out before you've even said a word to anyone.
Exactly. And that overwhelming feeling, that feeling of arriving somewhere strange and trying to figure out how to belong, is exactly what we are dissecting today. So, welcome to this deep dive.
Glad to be here.
Today, we are taking a really fascinating conceptual blueprint, something originally titled, What a Boarder Can Learn from Paddington Bear, and we're breaking it down.
Yes, the bear.
Yes, we are talking about the famous marmalade-eating children's character in the blue duffel coat, but we are looking at his story as a profound, universal psychological framework for how anyone, you, me, anyone, can navigate a jarring transition into a new community.
Because Paddington is not just a polite cartoon. I mean, in this context, he is the ultimate symbol of the newcomer experience.
Totally.
He perfectly represents that universal journey of arriving somewhere utterly foreign, in his case, obviously a London train station, and having to painstakingly learn how to belong. And the boarding school environment, which this framework specifically targets, just happens to be the perfect pressure cooker to examine this dynamic.
A pressure cooker is the exact right word for it.
Right. You have highly diverse individuals suddenly living together away from their families, and they're just forced to figure out a new society from scratch.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because before you can master a new culture or figure out the complex social dynamics of a new boarding house or, honestly, a new corporate office, you have to take the very first step toward belonging.
Yeah, and that first step is usually the hardest.
It really is. And belonging doesn't just magically happen. You don't just walk in and suddenly fit. It grows through very specific, simple actions. The Paddington framework emphasizes things like, gentle manners, greeting others politely, including new people and activities, and just offering help.
Yes, thoughtful behavior, particularly when you yourself are feeling deeply uncertain and vulnerable.
Right.
It sounds incredibly basic on the surface. Say please, say thank you, hold the door.
Right. And I have to stop you there because I can hear the listener thinking exactly what I'm thinking right now. It sounds almost naive. Like, if I am walking into a hyper-competitive boarding school environment or a cutthroat new job, is a polite good morning really going to save me?
It feels like it wouldn't be enough.
Exactly. When you are terrified and out of your element, trying to be the perfectly polite person feels a bit like bringing a butter knife to a sword fight. It just doesn't seem like enough to actually carve out a place for yourself.
What's fascinating here is that it feels insufficient. But that's because we drastically underestimate the raw psychological power of those micro interactions.
Really?
Oh, absolutely. When we talk about entering a new environment, we have to remember that everybody in that space, not just the newcomer, has their defensive walls up to some degree.
Oh, that makes sense.
Right. Established groups are inherently wary of disruption. So when you offer these small, consistent acts of kindness, you are essentially hacking the group's social nervous system.
Hacking it how? Like, what is actually happening in the room when you do that?
You are sending highly recognizable safety signals. When you look someone in the eye and offer a polite greeting or thank them for a small courtesy, you are communicating on a primal level, I am not a threat, and I recognize your value.
Wow, so it's biological.
It is. In a chaotic, unfamiliar environment, manners act as predictable scripts. When neither of you knows exactly where you stand, a universally understood script, like a polite greeting, gives both of your brains a split second to relax.
That is so interesting.
It effectively lowers the defensive walls of the people around you. You are creating a microclimate of trust with every polite interaction.
I really like that idea manners as a predictable script when everything else is unwritten. I've always thought of these small gestures as a kind of social currency.
Oh, I like that, social currency.
Yeah, because when you are brand new to a boarding house, you don't have the big, deep friendships yet. You haven't been through the trenches
Oh,
together.
no, not at
You
all.
can't rely on grand cinematic speeches to win people over or prove your loyalty. You are essentially broke in this new world.
Right, your bank account is at zero.
Exactly. So it's these micro interactions, a simple hello, passing the salt, a quick thank you, that serve as the pennies and dimes. They build the foundation of your social bank account in that new place, deposit by deposit.
That is a perfect analogy.
Mm.
And building that bank account is crucial because putting yourself out there and being kind when you are secretly terrified
Mm-hmm.
takes a massive amount of internal fortitude.
Takes so much energy.
It really does. It requires you to act outwardly calm while your internal threat detection system is screaming at you to hide.
Which perfectly bridges us to the internal mindset required to actually execute those kind behaviors. Because being the nice, polite newcomer is exhausting. The Paddington framework pairs those external actions with a very specific internal tandem courage and curiosity.
This is where the framework moves from the external behaviors to the internal state required to actually survive a transition like this without burning out. Think about the parallels here. You arrive at a place completely different from your home. You experience profound confusion. You make massive miscalculations about how things work. You experience intense homesickness.
I mean, for a boarder, the cognitive load must be staggering. They are dealing with adjusting to new cultural norms. They are trying to develop independence away from their families, often for the very first time in their lives.
Yes.
They are navigating entirely unfamiliar academic systems, trying to decode what teachers expect, all while trying to build friendships in a highly diverse community where everyone is simultaneously trying to establish their own identity.
It's exhausting just listing it out.
Yeah,
The sheer volume of new information the brain has to process every single day drains your energy.
totally.
And the instinct, when we are that overwhelmed, is to retreat, to shut down, stay in our rooms, and avoid engagement to protect our remaining energy.
Right, flight mode.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But the approach here emphasizes that the key to managing this cognitive load is to lean into curiosity rather than fear, to actively observe, to ask questions, to learn about the different traditions happening around you, and crucially, to share your own background as well.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Because when we talk about facing all those terrifying challenges, homesickness, weird new cultures, being totally alone, we usually tell people just be brave.
Right, toughen up.
Yeah. But society typically defines courage as the absolute absence of fear. We picture the brave person as the one who struts in, completely unbothered, totally confident, and just dominates the room. But this Paddington concept redefines courage entirely.
It does. It shifts the goalposts of what it means to be successful in a new space.
Yeah.
Courage does not mean feeling comfortable. It does not mean having all the answers or never feeling a knot of dread in your stomach.
It means continuing to engage and learn despite the uncertainty. It really makes me think of the difference between being a trespasser and being an explorer.
Oh, expand on that.
Well, if you walk into a new boarding house or a new city with the mindset of a trespasser, you are terrified of being found out. You feel like you don't belong there, so you're trying to hide. You're trying to blend in with the wallpaper, hoping nobody notices that you don't know the unwritten rules. You view every interaction as a potential trap that will expose you as a fraud.
And when you are in that trespasser mindset, your brain is flooded with cortisol. You are constantly in fight or flight mode, which actually shuts down the learning centers of your brain. You literally cannot adapt because you are too busy surviving.
Right. But an explorer walks into the exact same room and expects things to be completely different. An explorer asks questions constantly, completely unashamed, because the whole point of their presence is to discover how this new world works.
That's a great distinction.
If an explorer doesn't know what time dinner is or how to address the headmaster, they ask. Because why would they already know? They just got there.
That cognitive reframe changes everything. Recognizing difference actually enriches the community life rather than threatening it. Curiosity is the psychological tool that transforms a scary, unfamiliar situation into an active opportunity for learning.
It takes the pressure off.
Exactly. When you ask a question, you shift your brain's activity away from the amygdala, the fear center, and into the prefrontal cortex, which handles logic and curiosity. You actually calm your own nervous system down by being curious.
That is amazing.
The strange new customs aren't threats anymore, they're just data points. You are
Yeah.
simply learning how the machinery of this new community operates.
But let me push back on this explorer idea for a second.
Sure.
If I am playing the role of the curious explorer, engaging with everything, touching the new machinery, and asking a million questions, I am inevitably going to mess up. I am going to break a rule I didn't know existed, or totally mispronounce a crucial name, or sit in the wrong seat in the dining hall.
Inevitably.
And in highly structured environments, mistakes usually carry social penalties.
They do, and messing up is practically guaranteed in any meaningful transition. You cannot learn a new complex system without breaking a few minor rules along the way.
So how does this framework handle failure? Because Paddington is practically famous for his massive
Oh
misunderstanding.
yeah, the chaos.
Right. He is always accidentally flooding a bathroom or ruining a kitchen or taking things far too literally. If I do that in a real world setting, I'm not endearing. I'm just the incompetent new person that everyone groans about. Doesn't acting like an oblivious bear just get you ostracized?
If you never learn from it, yes. But the crucial distinction here is how you frame and respond to those missteps. For boarders, or anyone entering a new arena, these missteps are not failures. They are a mandatory part of adapting.
Mandatory.
Yes. You physically cannot skip the mistake phase. You cannot learn the boundaries of a new culture without occasionally stepping out of bounds.
Okay, but how does that actually play out? Because the fear of looking foolish is so universally paralyzing. Making a mistake in a new culture, whether it's dropping your tray in the quietest part of the cafeteria or completely misunderstanding a social cue during a conversation, it feels like tripping on stage during a silent play.
That's a visceral image.
Right. The spotlight is on you, everyone sees you hit the floor, and you just want the trapdoor to open up and swallow you whole.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, treating those exact mortifying mistakes as necessary learning steps is exactly what builds long-term psychological resilience. It operates a lot like exposure therapy.
Exposure therapy.
Yeah. When you trip on that stage and you feel that visceral flush of embarrassment, your brain assumes you are in mortal danger. Social rejection historically meant death for early humans.
So our brains literally treat dropping a lunch tray like a tiger attack.
Exactly. But when you make that mistake, realize the world actually didn't end. Seek guidance from a peer and correct the behavior next time. You are building psychological armor. You are proving to your own nervous system that you can survive acute social discomfort.
Wow.
This framework requires boarders to accept that adjustment simply takes time. They must reflect on their experiences rather than spiraling into discouragement. They have to actively seek guidance from peers or staff and maintain a positive attitude toward improvement.
Which means the way you recover from the mistake is actually more important than trying to prevent the mistake in the first place.
Precisely. If you never make a mistake because you are hiding in your room playing the trespasser, you never build that confidence. You remain fragile.
Because you haven't tested yourself.
Right. The moment a real challenge hits, you shatter because you haven't built the calluses of recovery. It's the visible recovery that makes people respect you. When people see you mess up, own it, ask for help, and fix it, they actually trust you more than if you had just been perfectly robotic from day one.
That is such a massive relief. It changes the whole internal narrative from I failed and I don't belong here to I am adapting and this trip is the dance. You aren't ruining the choreography. Stumbling is how you learn the steps.
It's the only way to learn the steps.
So we've talked a lot about the individual. We've got our newcomer. They are treating small acts of kindness as social currency. They are shifting from a trespasser to a curious explorer. And they are giving themselves the grace to flood the proverbial bathroom and learn from their mistakes.
Yep, they're doing the work.
But what happens when an entire boarding house, an entire system, actually adopts this Paddington framework? The perspective shifts from just helping one kid survive to creating a thriving macro community.
Yes, this is where we see the scaling effect of these behaviors. Kindness and curiosity don't just benefit the giver and the receiver in a vacuum. They scale up to create an atmosphere of emotional safety across the entire group.
Which is huge.
It is. Emotional safety is the absolute bedrock of any highly functioning community. It means students feel genuinely respected and supported, not just tolerated because they happen to live in the same building.
And how is that culture actually maintained day to day? Because look, a group of teenagers, or a group of competitive adults for that matter, aren't exactly known for spontaneously generating emotionally safe utopias.
No, definitely not.
Mm.
It requires a collective active agreement. The culture is maintained when the individuals actively choose to avoid exclusion. They consciously avoid unkind humor, which is often used as a cheap way to bond at someone else's expense.
Yeah, tearing someone down to build yourself up.
Exactly. Instead, they step up and offer encouragement during difficult periods. They demonstrate patience with cultural or personal differences, and they recognize that everyone in that building is on their own unique timeline of adjustment.
It's essentially taking those individual micro interactions we talked about at the very beginning, the polite greetings, the door holding, and enforcing them as a systemic group norm.
Exactly. It becomes the baseline expectation of the community rather than just a nice thing one person does.
So what does this all mean? Obviously, this blueprint was designed with students navigating the wild transition of living in a boarding house in mind. But why should you, the listener, care about this if you haven't seen the inside of a boarding school in decades? Or maybe you've never even been to one. Why does this very specific framework matter outside those ivy-covered, highly structured walls?
This raises an important question about the nature of the environments we all have to navigate today. Boarding houses are essentially intense, highly concentrated multicultural environments where people from vastly different backgrounds have to figure out how to live, work, and grow together.
Right.
In other words, they are perfect microcosms of the broader modern world.
They are essentially a trial run for globalized adulthood.
They really are. Mastering this transition, truly understanding the mechanics of belonging, cultural adaptation, and emotional safety develops deep empathy and high-level social awareness. It teaches you how to forge meaningful friendships across cultural divides.
And those are universal skills.
Absolutely. These aren't just nice traits for a teenager to have. These are the exact skills that are absolutely essential for success in our modern, highly interconnected world. Empathy isn't just an innate trait you're either born with or you aren't. It's a learned skill that comes from surviving unfamiliarity and helping others do the same.
It's the exact same toolkit, no matter the scale. Whether you are a 14-year-old unpacking a trunk in a drafty dorm room, or a 40-year-old executive walking into a boardroom in a foreign country after a corporate merger.
Yeah.
The stakes might look different, but the human mechanics are identical. You are still that bear, standing on the platform, holding a battered suitcase, trying to figure out how the underground train system works.
And the most important thing to remember is that feeling uncertain, feeling a bit lost or out of place while you figure that out is entirely normal. It is not a symptom of failure.
That is really the core takeaway here. That feeling of being unsure of how to respond or where to stand or what the unwritten rules are is a completely normal, unavoidable part of growth. Feeling out of place doesn't mean you don't belong there. It simply means you are in the active process of arriving.
Beautifully said.
Kindness as your currency, curiosity as your compass, and perseverance through your inevitable mistakes, those are the tools that actually turn those scary, unfamiliar environments into places where we truly belong.
And as the framework implies, it's not a one-time switch you flip. You don't just achieve belonging and then stop trying. It's an ongoing opportunity to practice these qualities every single day. Through your interactions, your openness, and your willingness to turn around and support the next newcomer who is also trying to find their footing.
It definitely makes you look at a simple, polite cartoon bear with a whole lot more respect.
It really does.
He's not just fumbling through London, he's running a masterclass in social integration. But looking at it this way also leaves us with something much deeper to consider about our own lives. We've seen through this breakdown how Paddington's mistakes, his visible confusion, and his total willingness to ask for help are actually vital to his integration into a new world. His vulnerability is the exact thing that draws the Brown family to him, helps him learn, and ultimately creates his community.
His lack of pretense acts as a catalyst for genuine connection.
Right. So think about how we usually operate. What if our modern obsession with fitting in seamlessly, with never showing weakness, never asking for help, and pretending we know exactly what we're doing on day one of a new job or in a new city is actually preventing us from forming true connections?
That's a great point.
We put so much energy into looking like we already belong. But maybe we shouldn't try to hide our uncertainty so desperately when we enter a new space. Maybe instead of projecting this flawless, bulletproof perfection, we should aim to be a little more visibly confused, a little more vulnerable, and completely open to receiving help. Just like a bear standing at a train station waiting for someone to show him the way.